been really interesting, actually. It's a good opportunity to come last. We were all given roughly the same topic with different species, and I thought, uh-oh, come last, everything will have been said before because there's such a lot of commonality across species, but we've all approached it in quite different ways. So it's kind of interesting how they all tag together, so it's kind of fun. So this is the Husbandry-Health Link, and it's not so much the cattle perspective as it's, because I don't really like being called a cow, it's Anne's view of the cattle industry. So let's start with that. So on Friday, when I was thinking I should probably do something about this, I thought, well, you know, you think about this stuff quite a bit, but, you know, where do you start? It's a huge, big topic. So I thought I'd do a local survey. Well, I didn't get very far. I got to ask 2 people, and then we had this almighty storm. This is just 2 streets away from our house. So this is in Scarsdale, New York. I live 30 minutes outside the city, and we had hurricane-force winds come through on the weekend. So I'm actually really pleased to be here because there's hot water and power. So it's great. So what was really unsettling, though, when I started my little survey was the first question I got asked was, why are you an authority? And I thought, oh dear, I don't really know. How come I'm standing here? So I'm a veterinarian. Well, that didn't cut it. That wasn't enough. But so why am I here? So I am a veterinarian. I figure I wear 3 hats. I've been in practice. I spent 13 years in practice or something like that, and doing dairy cattle work, both in New Zealand, where I'm from, and in the US. I've been in Pfizer Animal Health now for 10 years, so I've seen it from an industry perspective, and during that role I spent several years crossing the US looking at large dairies across different states. So I got quite a large and small, so I got quite a bit of a perspective of dairy farming in different regions. I'm also now living, as I mentioned, 35 minutes out of New York City. I grew up on a farm. I've spent my whole career on farms, and now I'm living in the most mass suburbia out. And it's fascinating to me what people's perception of food is. And just sitting at baseball games and opening people's fridges, it's amazing to me what people think about food. So that's my other hat. I'm a mother in Scarsdale, New York, so my little suburban area. So I asked, with part of my survey, so the first question I got back is, when I said welfare, husbandry, health, they said, okay, so my cynical friend said, so what is animal welfare? Because we started talking about things and we got kind of bogged down very quickly in areas that we couldn't work out. So, okay, it's not a bad place to start. So animal welfare refers to the state of the animal. It's healthy, well-nourished, comfortable, safe, able to express innate behaviour, not suffering from unpleasant stresses or states such as pain, fear and distress. This is an OIE definition from 2008. Animal husbandry is the treatments that an animal receives to obtain these states. Okay, I can work with that. So the things we do result in animal welfare. Good, can go with that. So the next question I got back was, or comment I got back with my question about animal welfare and husbandry, and it was to a physician, an eye specialist in Scarsdale, and his first comment out of his mouth was more or less this: oh yeah, animal agriculture. I saw some stuff on TV when they were breeding cows and it was really cruel, and it even said that it was unsafe to eat. Is that true? So 2 things came out immediately when I mentioned animal welfare. Was it's cruel, we're all cruel, and food safety. And it's that automatic linking of animal welfare and food safety that fascinates me. But it's there, and it's inextricably linked. I said no. So when I looked back, I started doing some more digging around in this stuff. I went and looked at FAO and OIE, FAO and OIE, and I was quite fascinated about the approach that they're taking on this one. The way they're looking at animal welfare is that it is a human welfare issue. The 1 billion people depend directly on animals for income, social status and security, as well as food and clothing. And more than half of those people are in developing countries as opposed to developed. They are considering animal welfare to be very much a global issue. Animal welfare is the production of food that's safe, healthy, secure food supply. So they're looking at animal welfare as the husbandry things that make good production in a way that maintains the welfare of the animal. So it's a different approach than I see in Scarsdale, which is you're all cruel, you're doing mean things, to animal welfare as a positive thing for productivity. So this is kind of where I came in the middle of it. Good welfare practices lead to food safety and well-being. plus a secure food supply if you look at it on a global aspect, and environmental sustainability for the long term, but as was mentioned before, that's a big piece to bite off, so I'm not even going to touch it today. So where am I going with this? It's going to look at 3 areas with respect to cattle: the production systems and management, and this ties very much in the poultry aspect of things as well. Good husbandry is normal. You know, we see the lowest common denominator on TV, but good husbandry is normal. That's what normal people do out there. And but we cannot claim 100% compliance. And if we look at animal welfare, animal health and animal production, the circles overlap so tremendously that there's very little that falls outside of each. There's very few things that we do for animal welfare that are productivity limiting. There are very few things we do for animal health that go against animal welfare. So these circles seriously overlap, which helps considerably. So the system of cattle production. Welfare assessments are best used in a systems approach that identify the causes and opportunities for successful intervention in the entire production chain. Looking at issues on an issue basis really messes things up. As was mentioned before, you change one thing and you get consequences down the line that are actually more harmful. The killing of male birds, for example, when you start taking away the moult. So my perspective on this is I grew up in New Zealand. I grew up on a sheep farm, but I spent a lot of time on dairy farms. And I came over, dairy farms in New Zealand are all extensive. Pasture grazing, you know, looks lovely on the hillside, blah, blah, blah. Came over here and went into confinement housing. And admittedly, the first time I walked in, it was a shock. But after being here for quite some time and understanding the systems, I cannot tell you which one's better for the animals. Each of them have their own pros, each of them have their own cons. But it's not issue by issue. I cannot tell you that one is better than the other. So it's the whole system that counts, not just one specific issue that matters. And if we're talking about systems, the number of stakeholders in production systems right now is huge. And there's more and more and more people getting interested in what's happening at the dairy level or at the feedlot level. And most of my talk will be on dairy because it's the area I know the most. But there are a lot of stakeholders, there are a lot of parts of the food production system that need to be considered. So the animal welfare landscape, what's happening out there right now? There's two things sort of going on in parallel, quite linked. One is the number of standards and assurance programs that are popping up for cattle. The other is the capacity building for implementation. Let's actually do something, not just measure it. So as far as the standards and assurance programs goes, there are the voluntary welfare codes. These are ones put out from groups like NCBA, NMPF, and so these are the industry groups, and other third-party groups like American Humane. The goal is to educate the producer and to educate and assure the producer and the customer. Just make sure, checking to see how well things are going and is there room for continuous improvement. Then there are the corporate programs, such as McDonald's, that are out there to assure the customer. Product differentiation, where they're labelled American Humane free, certified, or other sort of certification that the animal's been looked after properly before it hit the supermarket shelf. And that's to allow the consumer to choose by voting with their dollar. There's legislated rules and regulations for animal welfare guidelines. Not so much here, perhaps, in New Zealand, more so because we trade with the EU. So we legislate things in place to assure our trading partners that we're doing things right. And then there are international agreements, which are things like OIE, trying to develop common standards and common language for animal welfare to facilitate global trade. So we're all talking the same language. However, amongst all those five, and cattle at least at this stage, when we're in its infancy perhaps, or following behind pork and poultry, the standards are all over the place. It's very, very confusing right now on the number of different programs going on for animal welfare. What to do about it? There are different forms. There's education, which is, again, just telling people, making people, a general public, aware of animal welfare and of the positive things that are going on. Even at school level, there's opportunities to teach people that animal welfare is a significant component of what we already do. It's not an add-on, it's what we do to produce food. The engagement and awareness handling is about, or awareness building, is to get to those people who are actually touching the animals, to get them aware of what's going on and let them teach them about animal handling. What's the best way to do things? The next step with that is the theory of outcomes. is the training aspect of the person, again, touching the animal. That you cannot dictate everything. Every system's got slightly different nuances, particularly in cattle systems that have quite a bit of biological variation. So the training, the problem-solving mentality is, this is what I need to get to. How can I get to there from where I am here? What ways can I come up with to get to there? So that problem-solving mentality at the animal-human interface. And then the communication program is the consistency, that we're all speaking with the same voice, that animal agriculture has consistency in what they consider animal welfare to be. So right now it seems like there's a lot of activity and a lot of action, perhaps a lot of confusion. The public perhaps is only seeing some parts of it, but it'd be nice to see it consistent throughout. So animal welfare itself can be considered in three different ways. You've got the animal that tells you what's going on. So does the cow have lumps and bumps and bruises? Does she have mastitis? Does she have lame? So things that the animal can tell you right then and there when you're looking at her. Can't lie. That's what's going on. Body condition score. There's the resource-based criteria. Where is this animal living? The facilities, water flow, access to food, those sort of criteria. Again, measurable and can be scientifically related to animal welfare outcomes, particularly in the more consistent programs like poultry or swine, a little bit more difficult in cattle production systems. Then finally, there's the management-based criteria, an indirect indicator of what's going on, but these are the protocols, the systems that are in place to teach the employees on how to handle animals. So those ones are the ones that you can't really objectively measure, but those are the ones that perhaps make the biggest difference overall. So this picture here is of the most basic facilities out. If I went and did a facility audit for animal welfare on this place, I'd probably find the stalls the wrong shape, I don't know, the bedding's probably wrong, the alleyways are probably too small, but these are some of the healthiest animals you can get, because the owners have adapted to their facilities and are managing their animals in an animal welfare friendly way. So just by looking at facilities doesn't tell the whole story. And so how do you get to this culture of care? How do you get to where this management is looking at care as not as an add-on, but something that's done every day to raise the care of each individual animal in the facility? And it's something that's very difficult to teach, but it starts at the top. As a veterinarian walking on a farm, you could get a sense walking into a place on how well this was working or not. If there was a lot of banging and loud noise and swearing and things going on, you got a sense that maybe things weren't so great. But if you walk in and it's quiet, you can hear the radio quietly going somewhere, you get a sense that there's a culture here that really makes a difference. And trying to instill that in other places would be a challenge, but a nice outcome to have. So, good husbandry is the norm. We talked about the 5 freedoms before, and that's sort of a basis point. But I want to run through some examples. Well, first of all, I'm going to sneak in a few pictures of my kids every now and again. This is what it was like in the olden days. Have we lost all those 5 freedoms as we've gone into later, newer technology, into larger farms? And I argue no, we do things right. So taking a list of things that we should be considering as basic requirements from the Compassion for Animals non-profit group, I looked at some of the things that they were saying were absolutely necessary for good animal welfare. So adequate shelter. Well, we have outdoor lots, we provide shelter, and then housing. Housing is a huge science. There are lots and lots of people dedicate their lives to developing the right housing for animals. Why? Because it improves productivity. It reduces the respiratory stresses. It limits the risk of frostbite and heat. It enables them to get free access to food and water. I'm just going to show you some examples of things that we do right. We have good shelter up there. Nice, light, airy buildings. Good ventilation. The ventilation's a critical thing. If we don't have ventilation, the cows get pneumonia. They end up in the hospital barn. No, not successful, not productive. So these things are done anyway for animal productivity and animal health. And oh, by the way, it's good for welfare. So space for natural movement and exercise. So exercise yards are not uncommon. Loafing pens, particularly for cows in maternity. Why? Because it keeps feet and legs healthy. It's important to have longevity. 2 years, particularly on a dairy cow again, You invest 2 years to get that animal up to being productive. You want to keep it being productive as long as you can to get your return on investment. So feet and legs are important. That you get better access to food and water when there's space, when they can get to them, they're not overcrowded. Comfortable and appropriate bedding. There's a whole science around the size of the stall and the comfort of the stall. There are water beds for cows, and they found out that water bed for cows are not actually that great. Big, soft bedding is much better. Stall cleaning happens every time the cows go for milking. The pens are scraped, the back of the stalls are scraped down. But why? Because cows lying down produce more milk. And if the stall is comfortable, when they get up and they get down, they don't injure their teats. So another good example of spacious, light, airy, free stall facility. This one's in Florida. Interesting that it mentioned environmental sustainability a little bit, but they use dried manure solids now for bedding. If it's composted, it reduces the bacterial load. It's another use for it without putting it back into the environment, and it's soft and comfortable. You can put lots of it down and the cows really enjoy it. So it's another way of protecting the environment while maintaining cow comfort. And there are other things that are done to reduce heat and just to keep the cows comfortable. Sprinkler systems, there's a real science behind that. Locations of fans, ventilation. So a lot of effort is made into cow comfort in these facilities. What about health? I've probably spent years talking about health. So the maintenance of health and prevention of disease is a primary strategy. We do that extremely well. We put vaccination programs in place. We do testing for different diseases, make sure that that's not rampant in the flock or the herd. We teach people how to detect diseases. We have labour training programs where, this is the early sign of disease and this is an early intervention that you need to do. Why? Because it's easier to treat an animal or prevent a disease. We'll get into treatment in a minute. It's easier to prevent disease than it is to deal with sick animals. And also, if we don't get an illness running through the herd, our feed conversion rate goes up and we get more saleable product. So health, productivity, welfare, all in line. Biosecurity has been mentioned several times before. Again, this may not necessarily in cattle facilities anyway be like the bee's knees of how to do it, but it is still the messaging and the culture that we care about the diseases and pathogens that go into the herd. Prompt treatments of injuries and diseases, including vet support. Again, labour training. We do a lot of monitoring of performance to see what's going on. Regular herd health vet visits, just to make sure that everything's not just emergency practice, but vets come in early to make sure that things are going fine. And then also the vet coming in gives a third-party input. You can't always see what's going wrong when you're standing right in front of it. And then prompt and humane euthanasia. This is one of these things that's a global issue, and there's lots and lots of materials out there that support the proper and humane euthanasia. Productivity, why would you do this? Worker morale is not insignificant. So if workers are there seeing animals dying slowly, it doesn't retain them very well and it doesn't help morale. So prompt and humane euthanasia. And there are lots and lots of tools out there that are available to support prompt and humane euthanasia, including stuff from NIAA. So breeding. No selective breeding for traits that could compromise animal welfare. Well, this is an interesting one, because if we brought New Zealand Friesian cows, which are black and white cows, and put them in the US freestall situations, they would probably last about 2 months. They're just not set up for it. And vice versa, for putting US Holsteins out on pasture. So, but if you keep those animals in their right places, they do extremely well. So adapting the animal to the facilities and matching it needs to be right. So, and that's going on. There is breeding, selection for feet and legs to maintain longevity in their herd. There is selection for udder conformation because good udders don't get mastitis and they're easier to milk, particularly if you're with robots. Use of slower growing, more sustainable animals. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but if you can match nutrition to the animal's capability, that's got to be better than underfeeding or overfeeding. Bunk management, just making sure that the animals have the right amount of food at the right time. A lot of science goes into that. No genetic engineering or cloning. Okay, we'll accept that. It's not an issue anyway. Feeding and management. The adequate and appropriate feed. Again, a necessity, a basic requirement. Nutritionists are a key part of a management team. There's an absolute science. The advancements are amazing what's going on with nutritionists and animal feeding. We're not arguing with you there. The better we feed these animals, the better off they produce, the better off they are. Access to clean water at all times. The housing design maximises access, so the bullies don't push the smaller ones away, and it's designed for peak needs. This is a nice example of a water in Florida. Again, nice stainless steel, can be turned out and rinsed and cleaned every day, which they actually do. So these things happen. It's not way out there. We are very, very close to meeting what they consider to be basic requirements and what the public would accept as good animal welfare. An ability to perform natural behaviours. Okay, so this is one that gets interesting, because what is natural behaviour? We've had that discussion earlier. So maternity pens, are open, they can embedded. You can not nurse the calf, but you can be with the calf when it's born. There's intensive care for high-risk animals. The cows will toss their feed, so they've got the ability to toss feed around. I'm not sure what natural behaviour truly is, but I'm not sure it's unnatural behaviour we're seeing either. This one. No non-therapeutic mutilations, operations or invasive procedures. So one of the ones that keeps coming up is tail trimming for dairy. The mutilation of tail trimming. So is that necessary? Well, I think this is one of the things I think we use an example of continuous improvement. Before, tail trimming was considered necessary to keep the udder clean because it might cause mastitis and to stop the tail from hitting the milker in the face, which doesn't help attitude. So now there's a lot more emphasis towards keeping that tail clean through tail trimming and keeping the hair clean off the back of the udder through flaming, so that we don't have this issue with the dirty tail. So continuous improvement. We were doing it, we looked at it, we've assessed it, the industry's slowly changing. Do we do everything right the first time? No. Are we making progress? Definitely. Maternity pen looks great. It's clean, it's well bedded. It's pretty hard to critique that this is bad for the animals. Respect for social behaviour. I'll run through these fairly quickly with respect to time. Companionship of the own kind, well, that happens all the time. We have heifer pens. We keep heifers separate from cows because they're used to being with each other. We don't commingle them immediately. Stable, appropriate social groups. The pen sizes are adapted to be appropriate for social behaviours. A lot of effort made not to shift animals from one pen to another. A lot of effort made not to shift animals from one social group to another, because all that fighting and re-establishing the pecking order upsets milk production. Overcrowding, why would you do that? It reduces productivity per animal. Natural weaning periods. When a calf is born in the US, it is taken away and fed colostrum immediately. If it's left on the mother, it gets insufficient colostrum and runs the risk of dying of pathogens because of insufficient protection, and the cow doesn't milk out properly. The volume she produces is too great. She gets the risk of mastitis. In New Zealand, the calf stays on. Cows produce more concentrated milk, they can get their colostrum, and the cow can milk out. Different systems, different ways of doing it, different reasons why they're done differently. So that's heifer groups out there on pasture. This is in the US, not the New Zealand. Different ways of managing calves according to situations. Both work extremely well. And again, the calf picture, which is just appealing. So marketing, transport and slaughter. Again, this is another global issue. Has been a lot of global attention put towards it. Animal welfare training, making sure people understand this whole education stuff. And there's a lot of effort towards this, and this will be, it is legislated in some countries. A lot of effort towards understanding good transportation and making sure things are done right. But the handling aspect was one there as well. Good handling, teaching people good handling. And this is one example of where you can tell just by the animal's interaction with the human, again, my little daughter, of how that the animal's been well handled. You know she hasn't been beaten with a stick. You know she hasn't had the electric prod. So you can just pick those senses up, and it happens all the time. The number of times you can walk into a facility and the animals will come up and lick your hand. not good for biosecurity, but the animals in general are well cared for and not beaten. But there are a lot of positive stories out there, absolutely. The norm, good husbandry. However, not everybody is doing it the right way. And there's differences between people doing it right and trying to do it better, stupidity, and just not knowing and doing stupid things, and egregious cruelty. So there's no hope for the egregious cruelty. But somehow the industry has to differentiate itself from that particular group. The lowest common denominator doesn't represent the industry. Somehow there needs to be recognition that the industry is good. There are outliers, but in general it is good and is constantly improving. Piece by piece by piece, the industry is getting better every single day. So my message is focusing on the positive. Whenever I have these conversations in Scarsdale, my local town, my mind automatically goes to the negative. Dehorning, detailing, in confinement. But when I look at this stuff and think about it, there are some very, very positive stories of how we manage animals. And we're continuing to do so. The fact that we're talking about it is a positive impact. So, where are we today? We're doing things right, where there's room to improve, and we're doing it. We're looking for opportunities to improve, and we'll continue to do it. Animal agriculture in general is good. So a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and it's heading in the right way. We just need to promote the effort and energy that we're doing to the outside world.